Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining this first knowledge event of LinkedIn of this year. I am Carmen. I'm working as a content event creator at LinkedIn, and I am your host today. I always say that one time, so I did it right now. Thank you all for coming. I think you were all joining this session behind your desk at home, or maybe you are at the office. Well, thank you for joining. You are at the first knowledge event of the year, and we are calling it A Bite of Knowledge, Celebrate the New Year with New Digital Experiences. And for everyone that signed up before 4th of February, got a box at home with some very nice bites and confetti. Don't forget to use the confetti because it makes this session a little bit more festive. We are very proud. We have a collaboration this time with MyDish, with Picnic, and of course also a very awesome speaker from ourselves. So we're going to start almost. I have a couple of rules I always do before we start. Mute your microphone. I think everyone already did that. Shut off your mic of your camera. Ask the questions you have in the Q&A after each presentation. You can do that by raising your hand and I will unmute you so you can ask your questions. And this session will be recorded, so that will be available after this session and we will send it to you. I think that was all. Without further ado, we kick off this session with an awesome story of Simon Bosgieter, one of the founders of MyDish, and I want to give him the stage.
Yes.
Hello.
Thanks, Carmen, and thanks all for introducing me. Let me first share my screen with you guys so we're all on the same page, because of course we prepared some slide deck. So always the first question, is everybody able to see my screen? That will help. So Carmen, maybe you can confirm. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Now, again, thanks for introducing me, Carmen. My name is Simon, as mentioned. I'm one of the founders of MyDish, and unlike Daniel's Gabriel's presentation about Picnic later this day, you probably don't know our company yet. And that's not so surprising, because we didn't launch yet, and it's therefore very cool to tell you about the story of starting our business and the many choices and decisions we have made so far. For example, in the field of the product features, our business model, the used color scheme of our brand, the used software languages and chosen platforms, the integration with third parties, and so on. But most important, the user experience, but more about that later during my talk. So, besides that I'm one of the founders of MyDish, I'm also the development manager at Eating Group, which is a Tandem learning company. And most of you will know us from the products what we create, for example, the Magister and Eduarda. And with these products, we facilitate 70% of the secondary education and 90% of the secondary vocational education in the Netherlands. That's more than 2 million students and teachers who use our service every day. And nowadays, also the parents are using the system on a daily basis. But to be frank, I'm happy that in my back in the days that I went to school, that was not a possibility yet. But so what's the connection between my current position and Iddink and the MyDish platform, what we're going to talk about? To be frank, not that much. However, the fancy startup started somewhere throughout my career by combining multiple ideas, thoughts, and learnings out of the different companies where I was involved. And so I want to give you guys some insights about the background story, where it all started with, and that is something like this, and this is Mafia World. At the age of 30, that was in the year 2003, I was the founder of Mafia World, and the game used to have thousands of unique players within the Netherlands. And I developed it by my own. However, you can hardly call it development. It would be even rude to consider it like that. It was back in the days more like a script kiddie. I just simply copy and paste and doing some trial and error things and then see if things work out as expected, or at least I hoped. But nevertheless, it worked. And later on, even players of the game were involved, which did the development later on of the game. But my main learning from Mafia World was that free is the new paid. And this is important to keep in mind. At that time, the bigger major media companies in the Netherlands saw their subscriptions and revenues decline really with huge numbers. And at the same time, new kind of platforms grew. This was also in the case of Mafia World. But by making this platform completely free, people with plenty of time played the game continuously day in and day out. And therefore, I introduced the paid options for people with less time. So they could buy protection and buy extra game money by doing micropayments with their mobile phones. The reason why this worked so well was that the game was perfectly in balance. By playing a lot of hours, you really had great fun and you were able to win the game, and people with less hours available could also compete by spending just some euros. It was all about the big numbers. It seems that €1 is not a lot, but when multiple thousand players spend €1 per month, things get interesting, especially at the age of 13, of course. Within the game, there were no limitations at all, so paid or unpaid players both had the same options within the game. It was not that you couldn't unlock certain levels like you nowadays see with those kind of Facebook games. But then here is my study book. I founded this company during university, and you can already see my dish, my study book. We're all already getting closer. It is more or less a study comparing platform which integrated with the APIs of all online college book websites. As we were just an affiliate for those big book websites, we didn't have any books on stock. We just received a 10% affiliate fee for every sold book without any investment from our side. After we did a POC, a Parker proof of concept, of course, with WordPress, and yeah, sorry guys, it was WordPress where we started with it, and it simply worked. We could start quite fast and without any dependencies. Of course, we grew and we found many limitations, so we developed our own software later on. But with everything what we did, we kept search engine optimization in our mind. We didn't have big media budgets and books or any sold in a couple of weeks per year. So we were heavily relying on how people could find us. But a number one position on the relevant search engines like Google is of course not the only reason why students bought their books at our platform. We really made it easy for the students to find the cheapest books available. Of course, students could also do this by themselves. However, our user experience was really great. You simply selected your city, then your university, then your specific study, what you did, and finally you selected the year where you were in. And then directly the platform starts searching the entire book list at once. And so students could save 70% of their school costs on the books. But more or less how we called it and how we mentioned on the platform, 50% of your iPhone. Now, the reason why students used our platform was simple. We talked the language of the students. We did everything differently than our competition. We used Blue and Yellow Express money savings, and we made a cartoon of an owl, so you can see on the screen, which we used in all our communication. But maybe you're now wondering, why were you using this owl? And it was basically just fun, but there was also a reason behind that. And that was that the larger companies where we were competing with used it actively as their logo on a formal way. And we wanted to be frank, just to piss them off a little bit and just make some fun on that, because they didn't want to collaborate with us by making it, so we made it more like a cartoon to make a joke of it. But that's more or less what the story is behind it all. But go back to the story. What really was a game changer and seems to be our success, like I already mentioned, we showed the savings from students with the savings monitor. We used beers, iPhones, and everything else to keep students, which keeps students busy. By developing my study book, it was the first time that we considered these kind of user experience from the beginning, and that seems to be succeeding. But so let's skip the back parts of my life and go back to my current position in Iddink. In the Netherlands, the government pays the school fees. Keep that in mind until the age of 18. Back in the day, schools were all small, and you simply, if you had to need a locker on school, you will go to the concierge and you give him some money, and then he will give you the keys for 1 year of usage of that school locker. But nowadays, the schools have 30,000 or 40,000 students. So this doesn't work like this anymore. So for that reason, by a leading company, we created a POC to collect school service costs for parents. It was more or less a button in automated email or a button in a school learning system, which will redirect the parents to a list of options which they can select, and afterwards they can pay. For example, the already mentioned school lockers, but also school trips and other not direct school costs. these various costs, they could simply select and pay. And you can consider it like a basic web shop. Your products on one side and then you pay for them. But that's actually the case for everything that you buy online, isn't it? You have a choice, you choose, and you pay. And in order to offer you that choice, someone at the back needs to provide you the choices what you can make and put a price on it. It's basically not that exciting. So maybe you have almost fallen asleep, and sorry, Carmen and everybody who organized this, that's maybe not the right energy level then, and you're wondering, what does it all have to do with My Dish? Well, like I said, those moments provided me the insights which we are now using for developing the My Dish platform. So to be frank, where it really started, I don't know for sure. However, I do remember that during university, me and my friends had already been thinking about the system that would allow you to buy beer on account. The fun part is that it was during my study book pitch in the nearest pub across the university. Although it started as a joke, we were really discussing about how easy it'd be if you can simply select and the waiter can simply provide you the beers, and then at the end of the night you will pay when you go outside. Well, simple, isn't it? So it seems that I had the idea for some time to make hospitality industry digital, but as I was not familiar with the industry and we were rapidly growing with my study book platform, I didn't put effort to elaborate the idea back in the days. COVID-19, yes. Who doesn't have faced it in his near life so far? Even these kind of presentations, we're all doing this from home. And I know for sure that this would have been in the LinkedIn office right now if the COVID-19 situation was not there. So although you may now be thinking that the COVID-19 situation is the actual reason for starting the My Dish project, I would say it was more an enabler for this project. It was more something that made it more easy to change the hospitality industry because everything about Corona, wash your hands a lot, keeping distance, limiting movements, made me think about the original idea. I was reminded of the POC that we had made for the schools, which I just mentioned, where parents could choose which service they want to purchase and paying some parts of the menu, and then everything would be processed in the central system. Keep that small parts in mind, please. King's Day, but that was the real opener. But yeah, this seems to be not the right photo of the King's Day, as you all know from last year. This was more the photo of last year in Amsterdam. Yes, this is more likely. Maybe you can remember, but last year's King's Day was the hottest King's Day ever. When I looked outside, I thought of an old friend from school, which is Tim Jongens, and he had just opened a large restaurant with the capacity of a couple of hundred restaurants in Amsterdam at the NDSM Square. He did it together with Arne Klein. And I called him, and from that moment, everything exploded. I told him about the My Dish project and everything from the beginning, and he mentioned me that he and Arne were already doing research for a long time to find a solution which will bring digital experience to the hospitality floor. But they also mentioned me that during their research, they had spoke with a lot of different companies, and all of them mentioned that they had a digital ordering environment there, but it seems it was not good enough for them. So like I said, I pitched the My Dish concept to them, and they mentioned that if what I pitched was possible, it would be one fit to the needs what they had. And to be frank, also they mentioned the hospitality industry in general, at least what they were looking for. That was one thing for sure. So I called a former colleague and friend who was a respected developer, Vincent, and I told him about the concept and the team which was involved already. And quite soon after that moment, we started developing the My Dish POC. And in the meanwhile, more and more people become enthusiastic, and the team has grown a lot. And yeah, we now really have a good team. And as a team, we decided from the very beginning, from the first beginning, that whatever we will do, we need to compete with the human, the waiter. It seems to be crazy thing, but yeah, we're not only competing with them, we should also make his work more easy. Instead of being a runner or a waiter, who needs to do a lot in a short time, bringing back the experience. We want to bring back the experience to him and also bring back the experience to the guests, the digital experience of being in a restaurant. That's a tough one. And how can you do that? Because there are many obstacles to consider. But yeah, for an example of things how it's already been working, probably you all know those kind of sushi restaurants. In those sushi restaurants, there's one device most of the times, and you will get an iPad or so ever, and you can order your food from that machine. This works when you are with the two of you. Simply place the iPad in between and start ordering. However, can you imagine that you are with 4, 8, or even with 20 guests to celebrate your grandfather's birthday? It will take really long to get to know what is all on the menu. And after everybody knows what he wants, you also need to order the food. It doesn't work. Besides, of course, this is clumsy and maybe even not that hygienic. You also don't want that simply as a restaurant because to clean it and all that kind of things. So yeah, nowadays everyone has a mobile smartphone. Okay, almost everyone, I think. At least I do know someone who doesn't have. But we want to let people use their own device without the need of installing an app or so ever. You simply don't want your phone go around in a group of multiple people by using one phone. What you can do, you scan the QR code and leave it on. You don't want that. You don't know what kind of messages you will receive or so ever. So but the foremost thing what we want to achieve, and this is something that most digital ordering apps seem to forget, is including the current POS systems which are already on the market, is the reason why people go out for dinner at all. People go out for dinner to celebrate, to enjoy, to get spoiled themselves. They want a waiter, a host who gives them advice about the products which they serve. It's not like you're chilling in your tracksuit right on the couch watching your favorite sports clubs, or you go out for the experience. You go out to have the fun. But most importantly, the social aspect. Often you are together with someone else or even more people in the entire group. The social aspect is important. But also don't forget restaurants. They invest thousands and thousands of euros and to make the restaurant look great. And you don't want to put those ugly QR codes on your tables. As said before, people go out for dinner and drinks to be treated, to enjoy. You want to experience it. And to be frank, a QR code on your table, it is just an enabler. It's something which is holding some data. It is something what will bring you to a website. Besides, it's just not that nice to have on your tables. It's also not safe because when you are providing some kind of hospitality by making people pay afterwards, you can also simply take a photo of it, share it in a WhatsApp group, and everybody can start ordering on that QR code and they don't pay for it. So as a restaurant, you will have to pay the bill for that. Now, to explain our solution, I would like to show you our animation. Although it is in Dutch, it's in Dutch. It will explain you the restaurant perspective. And to do so, I will start. I hope I select the audio share functionality. So give me 1 sec. I will start sharing it again because I think I forget that one. And yes, it is now. And let me go back to this. Excuse me for this interruption, which of course was not intended. Give me a sec. And meanwhile, I see that someone's trying to get in the lobby. Now I'm back, and I hope you will have the sound effect on it. So here it comes.
I don't hear any sound, Simon.
Now, let me tell about it. It's about the platform where we have the possibility that you can work together. It's all created with people in mind, with have digital hospitality in mind, people working also. As a way that you will create a code, guests can scan it directly. They will come in a personal menu where they can start ordering from their own mobile phone. Everybody can contribute on the same table, and you can pay on your own, or you can pay for everyone on the table. As a restaurant, you have the possibility to create different menus, which you can add to a separate table. For example, a complete menu or the drink menu. And you can add these menus to specific areas on your restaurant. For example, you can do the drink menu on the beach side. And you can decide if people have to pay directly or they have to pay afterwards. But you can also decide that there's a different menu for specific areas in your restaurant. For example, with limited product line whatsoever. And when the products are done, the guests will get a message that they can get the food. So it's not only make it more easy and time saving and hygienic, also to be data up. Yes, so it will take most important you as a waiter have the possibility to yes, yeah. So like so that's more or less what the video was about. So sorry for that there was no sound under it because it was the explanation which were there. But as you probably already expect, we have two different user groups. Both cannot go without the other. At one side, we have the restaurant and his waiters, and on the other hand, we have the guests. And both they will have different expectations about the platform, needs, and so ever. So we continuously need to focus on both these user groups. But that's not enough. As we are a cloud-based application, which will be used via the browser or heavily rely on the internet, and most of the time it will be Wi-Fi, not everyone has the latest gear in the restaurant or the mobile phone. So that's something we also need to take in consideration. And as we mentioned, we do QR, same, but different, but it is different what we do. Like I mentioned earlier, the QR codes are not something that the restaurant wants on their tables. In addition, I also said that it's not safe to apply because it is simply possible to place orders anywhere in the world. In addition, everybody's able to get those things to start ordering the things on behalf of someone else. And we solve this problem by putting the waiter back in a position. The waiter receives the guest and opens the table. By opening the table, at that moment, a unique QR code is generated at a specific moment. And at that moment, the waiter also can change, for example, the payment options. He can decide if this is a customer who comes every week and he's sitting on a terrace, which is, basic settings has something like you have to pay for every round. We can make it that guest especially can pay afterwards. So you will have that hospitality back in place. Now, then you think of the QR code, so it is not on the table, so the waiter has to provide it. Yes, that's true. But also guests can share it within their group, so they can let other people also use that QR code. And after they pay, the QR code won't be valid anymore, so it will be a safe solution without the chance that other people will start payments on that whatsoever. So as mentioned before, we want to let people use their own device without the need of installing an app. Everyone should use their own telephone as a menu, and they will have the possibility to directly placing the orders. Now, to do so, we had to integrate with the POS systems, and every POS system had different workflows and namings of specific things. For example, the Dutch word of wijken, sales areas in a restaurant, which is mostly used in the restaurants. But some POS system using other internal names. And why is this so important? Because the waiter should be able to be a great host, and he doesn't want to look on how things will be called in his POS system and how it's called in the handheld and how it's called on the guest side. We wanted the waiter could directly see who's ordering what, and based on that, what he had already been ordering, he can give advice and those kind of things. For the social aspect, which I already mentioned, we implemented the gamification module, and that's more like the Mafia World concept. Normally, when you start ordering at a waiter, you hear what someone else ordering at the waiter. Maybe you were thinking about ordering a beer, while someone else at that moment already ordering a good wine. And if you hear someone else ordering a good wine, you might also agree to choose that decision. Because everyone in my dish ordering with their own mobile phone, you can see what the other is ordering at the table through so-called snack bars, which we have implemented. This is not only convenient to the guests, but it's also a good upsell possibility for the restaurants. Yeah. Here you will have some view on how the MyDish project will look like in real, or not will look like, how it will look like at the moment. We put some screenshots on the slides, and you will see you can select from your own mobile phone. You can select the extras. And as you can see on the right screen, the fourth iPhone, you can see Robin has added the Runde Carpaccio. So everybody will see on his own phone what the other is ordering. And for the Dutch, because Dutch will be Dutch, you can split the payment, or you can pay for everyone as well. You can give the round, you can give a tip or so ever, but you can also start splitting on specific uses. And why is that interesting? Sometimes you're dining with you and your girlfriend, but the other is dining with 4 childs and his girlfriend, then you don't want to split sometimes 50-50%. So also for this kind of situations, we had to come up with something. And the reason why this is possible is that we are having everybody's ordering data from his own mobile phone. So we exactly know what everybody's ordering. So the split payment functionality is there. And why is that so important? Now, the reason for that is making the payment is not something that is giving the amount of money or the cash for the restaurant. Yeah, of course, it's giving them the cash, but it also costs them cash to collect the money. They have to put the bill in smaller bills and they have to make payment for everybody. And it can take up to 5 or 10 minutes or so ever to make just a single payment. And other guests need to wait. And probably you all have faced sometimes that you want to pay something and you raise your hand and then the waiter's coming. Oh, sorry, I'm not able to accept payment. That's more, I will send you my colleague who will do the payment. So also on a guest level, when you're finished, you eat your food, you simply want to pay, you want to go. But what now? Now, at the moment, we are in the final phase of a launchable version. Oh, wait, this is not the right slide, to be frank. Yeah, this is more the right slide and how it went. The arrow before was way too much in a straight line. Yeah, it's great to see how everything is growing, but what now? Now, as I said, we are in the final phase of the launchable version. And in the meantime, we are preparing everything for the reopening of the catering, hospitality, everything what's been involved. We must be ready, of course, when the hospitality industry reopens after the COVID regulations, which you know. And at the moment, we are mainly busy with integration with the various POS systems. And here also comes user experience in place and many strategical choices about that. So the reason for that is that we position ourselves as an add-on to the POS system. So we heavily rely on the user experience of the POS system because not every POS system is the same, obviously. And of course, not every POS system has the same API possibilities. So we can come up with bright ideas how we want to do this and how we want to do that. But some kind of things, we also have the limitations of what the POS system is providing us. Of course, we are start launching with POS systems will provide the entire MyDish possibility. Another thing what I want to share, and that's something is managing the expectations, because we always want more. And as soon as we are now start talking with the account management team and we start making some sales, we will get more feedback, and we really need to collect things because we want to start and we want to be ready. But we still have enough ideas and certainly enough challenges to face. And yeah, from that point of view, I often get the question, where will MyDish be in a couple number of months? And the honest answer is, I simply don't know. Time will tell. I'm convinced that we have really made something that will help the hospitality industry in all perspectives. And if not, we need to, because we are going to offer the platform for free, just like I did with Mafia World. We will make our money through the transactions which will be generated. So if the platform is not being used by the restaurants or by the guests, then we will not earn anything. So we can consider that as the highest user experience reward. It is our revenue model. The platform stands and falls with user experience. Thanks for your attention. And Carmen, I don't know if we still have some time for some questions, but this is mainly what I want to share from our point of view from the MyDish platform.
Yes, thank you very much for your inspiring story about MyDish. Great to hear about it. Well, we have some time left, so we have like 5 minutes or so. Let's quickly check if there are any questions. If you have a question, just raise your hand by the raise your hand button, and then I can unmute you to ask your question to Simon. I see there is one. Hans, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, good afternoon. I switch also my camera
Yes.
for a moment. Simon, what's in for the restaurant? What can they earn from it? What
can they earn from it? Now, the most important thing is they can put the digital part on it. What you now see is that they put the ugly QR codes on their desks, and they don't know who's ordering what. So, for example, you are providing your guest a solution, Then they start ordering with it because they will try it because it's on the table. And then after 2 minutes, the waiter is coming. Hey, sir, what can I do for you?
Mhm.
And then at that moment, you're almost punishing your guest, which came to your restaurant, and you let them ordering by themselves. And then you mentioning that they can also order via you. So it is something they will add for the hospitality, the level of hospitality you want to do. You can put your waiters, more quality waiters on the tables by giving them the possibility to have more time spending with the guest on giving them advice about good wines or good food combinations or whatsoever. Now they are running around, they are taking the notes, they are writing it down, putting it on your table, and they can now really focus on giving the hospitality experience.
Yeah, and financially?
And financially, it will save them money. What I mentioned, I don't know the exact numbers because I didn't do those calculations on my own, but that's more from the restaurant perspective, is that they have a lot of cost on receiving the money, what I mentioned. The splitting of the amounts of money, for example, if you have the entire tourist, which is full of guests, it's taking them a lot of time to split it in smaller bills and receiving the payments. For example, a normal payment with a debit card will cost them 8 cents per transaction. That's the direct cost of the payment which is being done, and then also is there of calculation, the different part everybody needs to pay, and it's of course it's the cost of labor, which the waiter is there for 5 minutes on the table, and he cannot taking new orders at the other side. So when you take all those things in account, there are really things that they can save on those perspectives.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Hans. All right, are there any more questions? And maybe if there are afterwards, they can also contact you, right, Simon?
Yeah.
Great.
Yes. Simon@mydish.nl.
Thanks. All right. I think we will go on. If there are any questions for Simon left, you can also do that in the next Q&A or afterwards to Simon's.
Okay.
Great. Thank
Thanks
you very much for your time.
Yes.
All right. Well, then we go on with my colleague, Anders Seelan. He's a principal at Linkit of the JavaScript squad. And he is going to tell us an inspiring story about how you take care of the fact that your mobile website meets the high standards of the online customer in 2021. I already see him. Under, you can take the stage.
Hi, Carmen. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. I think you see an empty screen right now, right?
Yes, I can see it.
Just a moment. Let me share it correctly. Yeah. Yes. Can you see it now?
Yeah, I can see your presentation.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining this session. I am going to talk about building journeys on the web, like in the real world. And speaking of the real world, imagine you're walking into an unfamiliar retail store to do your shopping. But here and there, carts blocking the aisle, making you detour. And there's stuff ahead, slowly refilling the shelves you have to wait for. And unexpected cleaning or construction stops you on your way to checkout. People using the web are also on journey, with each of their actions compose one step in what would preferably be a continuous flow. And just like in the real world, they can be interrupted by delays, distracted from their tasks, and led to make errors. These events sequentially can lead to reduced satisfaction and abandonment of the site or the whole journey. In both cases, removing obstacles and interruptions is the key to a smooth journey and a happy client. Let's discover how we can build seamless experiences on the web to prevent users from being tripped up. COVID, unprecedented, extraordinary, game-changing. There are many adjectives to describe the effects of COVID-19 had over the last 12 months. One thing is certain, the events of 2020 changed the face of how we do business. Studies by McKinsey claim that the pandemic has accelerated the growth of e-commerce by up to 5 years, which will have very immediate and profound impacts on businesses all around the world. Also, MyDish was a good example of that. And in a matter of 90 days in the US, people have vaulted forward 10 years in consumer and business digital adoption. And this is a graphic of the growth of website traffic to top 500 global e-commerce websites. It's a combination of desktop and mobile web. And the global e-commerce market saw a total of 32% increase in website traffic during 2020. We have seen an exponential growth in the e-commerce market globally over the last 12 months, meaning the market for payment acceptance is also increasing. Once the pandemic truly took effect globally back in March 2020, we saw consistent and significant growth in the number of consumers visiting online stores. And the biggest growth period in 2020 compared to 2019 was between October and December, a period including key shopping periods such as Christmas and Black Friday. And how much are users visiting websites on mobile web and desktop? Are there any patterns in the traffic that websites receive from mobile versus desktop? A report published on Perficient.com shows mobile versus desktop traffic trends over several years using SimilarWeb as a data source. And while the majority of visits, which is 58% of the site visits, coming from the mobile devices made up only 42% of total time spent online. Moreover, the average time spent per visit is roughly twice as much on desktop compared to mobile, which is 11.52 minutes on desktop versus 5.95 minutes on mobile. And this is from, the slide shows a quote from Chrome UX report, the latest report from Chrome team, which shows us the mobile represents 79.6% of time spent amongst retail sites, but it only accounts for 32.3% of e-commerce sales. What does it mean? It means the experiences of users might start on mobile because mobile seems like the biggest acquisition platform for users, but it typically continues on the desktop. So we should, when we think about retail experiences, we should think about omni-channel. An experience of a buying process can start in a mobile device and it can continue on a desktop platform. And this also shows us the behavior changed in users' experience. The pandemic is rapidly changing the consumer behavior. Retailers were already facing a shift in consumer behavior to digital channels before the pandemic, but now face store closures and reduced capacities in store, requiring them to adapt faster than they ever expected. And considering all the graphics and reports that we have seen, the experiences is not about pages on the web, it's about the total and overall journey. Today we are going to walk through the journey on a typical retail experience or a web experience, and then we will see how to improve those experiences. A small introduction of myself. My name is Önder Ceylan. I'm working for Linkit as a principal engineer in JavaScript Squad. Önder Ceylan is my Twitter handle. And via Linkit, nowadays I help Finlands Codecampen as our client. And in my free time, I like contributing into local communities such as GDG-NL and IT Next. Thinking about measurement tools and also metrics, the most common type of interruption of web users' experience is waiting for page to load. For a developer, a page load is a discrete event and some delay might feel inevitable. However, a page load more often happens in the middle of a user's journey as they research a new product or add items to a cart for purchase. So from the user's point of view, loading a particular page doesn't represent a natural break. They haven't yet achieved their goal, which makes them less tolerant for delays. This means pages need to load fast so the user's journey can flow smoothly. Let's discover why speed matters and why it's a feature for e-commerce sites. A new study, Milliseconds Make Millions, reveals the significant impact of mobile site speed on consumers' willingness to spend money and engage with brands online. The results show that even 0.5 1 second improvement in load times can improve progression rates across the final purchase funnel. There was also a positive impact on page views, conversion rates, and average order value. The results underline that rising customer expectations and increasing use of smartphones are amplifying the need for mobile speed. The competitive gap will widen between brands who provide great mobile experiences and those who don't. With a 0.1 second improvement in site speed across the measured metrics in the site speed, participants observed an increase in progression rates on almost every step of the mobile journey. It starts with your homepage, continues with the product listing page and details page, and adding to basket, from basket to checkout, and finally finalizing the order. In particular, there was an increase of 3.2% from product listing page to product detail page, and 9.1% increase from product details page to add to basket page. These are increasing the conversion rates, and in overall, retail consumers also spent 9.2% more spending their money, which is a dramatic uplift. And all of the improvements in the chart were observed over a 0.1 second improvement in 4 metrics: largest contentful paint, estimated input latency, average load time, maximum server latency. We will go through these metrics and we will see how to optimize them. So there are a couple of myths about metrics and how to measure them. The first one is user experience can be captured with a single metric. This is not true. Good user experience is not captured by a single point of time, so it shouldn't depend on a single metric. The second myth is user experience can be captured with a single representative user. Real-world performance is highly valuable due to differences in users' devices, network conditions, and other factors, so targeting a single representative user doesn't make sense. And the third myth, my website loads fast for me, so it should be load fast for my users. The devices and networks that developers test load performance are often much faster than what your users actually experience. So we need to understand the lab data and the field data to make a distinction between what we develop and what users experience in the real world. Lab data is a performance data collected within a controlled environment with predefined device and network settings. This offers reproducible results and debugging capabilities to help identify, isolate, and fix performance issues. This is a typical development environment we developers use in our daily lives. And the field data, also called as real user monitoring or RUM. Field data is a performance data collected from real page loads your users are experiencing in the wild. So you can collect these reports from users that are visiting your website from India, let's say. And Web Vitals. Web Vitals is an initiative by Google to provide unified guidance for quality signals that are essential to delivering a great user experience on the web. Google has provided a number of tools over the last years to measure and report on performance. Some developers are experts at using these tools, while others have found the abundance of both tools and metrics challenging to keep up with. Site owners should not have to be performance gurus in order to understand the quality of experience they are delivering to their users. The Web Vitals initiative aims to simplify the landscape and help sites focus on the metrics that matter most, the core Web Vitals. Today, we are going to go through the core Web Vitals and see how we can optimize those. Core Web Vitals are the subset of Web Vitals that apply to all pages, and it should be measured by all site owners, and it will be surfaced across all Google tools. Each of the core Web Vitals represents a distinct facet of the user experience. It's measurable in the field, and it reflects the real-world experience of a critical user-centric outcome. The first metric is about loading. It's LCP, and it's the largest contentful paint. It measures the loading performance. The second metric is first input delay. It measures the interactivity. And the third Core Web Vital metric is cumulative layout shift. It measures the visual stability. So by delivering good metrics out of these three Core Web Vitals, we guarantee we have a good loading experience, we have a good interactivity for our web pages, and we have a good visual stability. We will see what those means in the later slides. And in November 2020, Google announced that the page experience signals in ranking will roll out in May 2021. So we still have a couple of months to deliver good results with this Core Web Vitals metrics, and it will have a huge impact on our business because it will affect the search ranking on the Google search results for our website. Before, it was only based on mobile friendliness, safe browsing, HTTPS, and having no intrusive interstitials. Now the Core Web Vitals are also added to the list, so they will impact our search ranking. And how to measure those? Tools like Lighthouse that load pages in simulated environment without the user cannot measure FID metric, the first input delay, because it depends on the user. However, the total blocking time metric is a replacement for it. So you can see in this table, TBT is replaced FID for some tools because we use those tools in our lab environment. In our lab environment, we cannot simulate user input action. But these are the tools that we can get the field data and the lab data out of our website. You can use any of these tools and it will give you some guidelines and roadmap to improve those scores. And how to measure the field data for our website. During the last Chrome Dev Summit event in November 2020, there was a release of Web Vitals JavaScript package. And via using this package, we can collect all these metrics to our favorite analytics tool. It can also be a Google Analytics, of course, or another tool. And it will collect the field data for us over time for every user we have. And how to see this data over time and how to see the changes we have, the improvements we have. We can use this open source library, which is called Web Vitals Report. It's an app that makes it easy for users to get the Web Vitals JavaScript library data and create custom visualizations of the data they have sent to Google Analytics. The app is available to use as a standalone tool, so you can also fork it or create your own dashboard. By accessing this app, you can give access to your Google Analytics, and you can see the time, you can see the results of the breakdown of our Core Web Vitals over time. Let's start with the first metric, how to optimize LCP metric. We need to render our main content faster. LCP is about that mostly, and this is a frustrated user after a poor LCP result. I can't see any useful content. Why does it take so long to load? This is a typical frustrated user for any website experiencing a slow loading times. And we can improve our LCP metric by working on slow server response times, render blocking, disabling render blocking JavaScript and CSS, improving slow resource load times, and improving client-side rendering. Let's see the causes of a poor LCP. So we will start with slow server response times. The longer it takes to a browser to receive content from the server, the longer it takes to render anything on the screen. A faster server response time directly improves every single page load metric, including LCP. And we can improve our server response times by optimizing our server, routing users to a nearby CDN, a content delivery network, caching assets, serving HTML pages with cache-first strategy, and establishing third-party connections early. This graphic shows a service worker improvement on a web page. PWAs and service workers are one of my favorite topics. And this is also an outcome on an LCP metric of using a service worker and a PWA. When installed, a service worker runs in browser background and it can intercept requests from the server. This level of programmatic cache controls the possible HTML files from our page content, and it can update the cache when the content has changed. The chart shows the LCP distributions that have been reduced on a site using this pattern. And by caching the HTML responses, which is shown by the blue bars, we can see how the LCP metric is improved. Establishing third-party connections early is also a big improvement, and we can do that by using the link element and rel preconnect and DNS prefetch commands. And by doing so, we will be creating early TCP connections to external domains. If you are using third-party libraries, this is very handy. It will allow browser to open a connection early in the session, and it will load the resources faster. And we can also avoid blocking JavaScript and CSS on our page render. And doing so, we need to minify the CSS, defer non-critical CSS files. We need to inline critical CSS. And we need to minify and compress our JavaScript files. We need to defer unused JavaScript and minimize unused polyfills. Let's see how we can see the unused CSS files of our application. In Chrome DevTools, we can navigate to the coverage tab, and it shows us the JavaScript file and CSS file coverages of our application. If you are loading a big file, let's say a big bundle for our CSS, and if you are not using 92.8% of the codes in it, we are just wasting our browser's render time and also loading time. So lazy loading these resources makes a lot of sense. It will improve the speed of our application. So this is a common approach of the improvements. And another approach is inlining the critical CSS. There are a lot of tools which automatically handles that, such as critical CSS, and Penthouse libraries. And they will render your web page the above the fold content of the page, and it will extract the CSS code which renders the above the fold content, which is the content you see on the first look on the browser window, and it will inline that. And by inlining, we will guarantee the rendering performance. And slow resource loading times can also be optimized by optimizing and compressing the images or preloading important resources, compressing text files, delivering different assets based on network connection, adaptive serving. And we can also cache assets using a service worker. For many sites, images are the largest element in view, and when the page has finished loading, hero images, large carousels, or banner images are all common examples of this. And improving how long it takes to load and render these types of images will directly speed up LCP. To do this, we need to consider not using an image in the first place. If it's not relevant to the content, remove it. Compress images with a library like ImageMin, for example. We need to convert images into newer formats such as JPEG 2000, JPEG XR, or WebP. And we need to use responsive images to load a smaller resolution when required. And we need to consider using an image CDN. And actually, as an example, on our Linkit NL website, we use one of those image CDNs to optimize images for our website. And how we preload important resources. Let's say you have a web font that you need to load instantly before showing empty spaces instead of text in your web page. Preloading can help. You can preload web font by using link-rel preload and then providing the resource you would like to preload. It works for scripts, styles, images, videos, or web fonts. And it will speed up the loading time for the critical resources that you need to load fast. And adaptive serving is one of my favorite features of the web, because web applications are not like how you deliver once and forget about it. It lives differently on different browsers, on different platforms, on different devices. And adaptive serving helps us to deliver the best experience we can under certain circumstances. For instance, when we load an image data or video data, we can get the advantage of getting the connection information of the user's device, and then if the connection is fast enough, we can load the video, and if it's slow, we can replace that video with an image. And we can also get this even further by accessing the device memory, hardware concurrency, and preference for saving data. So based on user system preferences and browser preferences and device capabilities, we need to act and adapt our web application experience. This can be stopping the animations. This can be delivering a small amount of data instead of preloading that. There are so many possibilities around this. Caching assets using a service worker. This is also one of the capabilities of progressive web apps. And I recommend using libraries such as Workbox. It's an open source library to create service worker implementations for progressive web apps. And it saves a lot of time for building such cache algorithm. For instance, with this code snippet, we can cache all the PNG images we have on the website by just copy pasting these 10 lines of code. And pre-caching critical resources using a service worker can reduce their loading times significantly, especially for users who reload the web page with a weaker connection, or even if they're offline, they will be still able to access it. Client-side rendering is another reason for a poor LCP results. And we can improve the client-side rendering of our application by minimizing critical JavaScript, using server-side rendering, and using pre-rendering. Optimizing FID metric. FID metric is first input delay, and it's about interacting after a certain user action. And this summarizes the poor experience of a frustrated users around this metric. I clicked, but nothing happened. Why can't I interact with this page? I assume you also suffered with this on some websites. You try to load a web page and you click on a button, but it doesn't do anything until it loads the page. So that button interactivity is blocked, and this is about how to unblock that. The optimizations are about breaking up the long tasks, optimizing for interaction readiness, using a web worker, and reducing JavaScript execution time. These are the common improvements for FID metric. And a good FID metric is under 100 milliseconds. So any user action should react within 100 milliseconds. If not, it needs improvement. If it's more than 300, it's poor, and it will impact our search ranking in the future. How we break up the long tasks. If there is a heavy JavaScript calculation happening in our scripts, we can move that calculation, that heavy task, to a web worker. For instance, these web tools chart shows with a red arrow on the corner a long task, and this is a sign of the JavaScript execution block that could be moved to a separate worker thread. As discussed, a block main thread is one of the main causes of input delay. Web workers make it possible to run JavaScript on a background thread. So browsers are single-threaded, and it has been a limitation for web developers for a long time. And now we have the capability to use additional threads in the browser, so we can access these additional threads without blocking any user interaction. We can also optimize our page for interaction readiness. And for instance, we can use first-party script execution, and we need to move that first-party script execution because it can delay our interaction readiness, such as using the web workers. The data fetching can impact many aspects of interaction readiness. For instance, if it's a single-page application, we load the bundle of the application, it renders, and then it makes an HTTP request to our API. Then again, the UI is blocked because it does happen on the main thread of our browser. And third-party script execution can also delay interaction latency. So if we don't have to do it immediately, we can delay loading third-party scripts. It's one of the most common blockings on the websites. So we need to insert scripts carefully. How to reduce the JavaScript execution time? We can defer unused JavaScript. we can also minimize unused polyfills. And for instance, if you're delivering your application to modern browsers, you don't have to provide a big bundle which includes a lot of polyfills that are not required for modern browsers. You can split this. And also, deferring means you can code split your bundle into multiple chunks. The third-party scripts can be also considered non-critical, and you can load them by using async or defer. You can debug the interaction readiness with total blocking time in the footer of DevTools performance panel, and you will see total blocking time in the footer bar. And this gives an indication of our block on the first input delay. The third metric is the cumulative layout shift metric. We need to avoid sudden layout shifts to improve our user experience. And a typical frustrated user on the web experiences these user experience metrics, such as I was about to click that, why did it move? I'm sure this also happened to you. So you try to load a web page, and right about to click on a button, an image loads, and then your button shifts away, and then you click on an ad or something, which is a big annoyance. So what causes a poor cumulative layout shift metric? Images without dimensions, ads, embeds, and iframes without dimensions, dynamically injected content, and web fonts causing void or fault. Images without dimensions. So we need to always include width and height size attributes of our images and video elements. If you don't do this, it will shift the content away and it will annoy our users. And alternatively, we can reserve the required space if you don't know the exact width and height of the image. We can use CSS aspect ratio boxes. This approach ensures that the browser can allocate the correct amount of space in the document while the image is loading. And this shows a typical experience of layout shift. Right during the loading, the first paragraph, the content shifted, then I lost where I was reading because of the images and not having the aspect ratio or the reserved spot. How to use the aspect ratio? We have a new CSS property called aspect ratio. So we can provide these aspect ratio like 0.5625 for an image size 640 pixels to 360 pixels. And for older browsers, you can fall back to using padding top. So we can use this percentage of the aspect ratio as a padding top value, and it will give the same effect as using the aspect ratio. And as embeds and iframes without dimensions, what we can do about them? So we can reserve the spot that they are actually using for the render. So that will guarantee that the items will render within the reserved spot. And also, if you are loading a YouTube video, let's say within an iframe, we can use a so-called facade image or component, which mimics the behavior of the video player of YouTube, but it is not. It's a dummy component with buttons, and it doesn't load the YouTube video immediately. It waits for user interaction, and once you click on play, then it will load the actual iframe, and it will save a lot of resources. And dynamic content, we need to avoid inserting new content above existing content unless in response to a user interaction. This ensures any layout shifts that occur are expected. And web fonts causing fault. And what are they? Flash of unstyled text or flash of invisible text. This is also a typical experience you see on the web. You load a page, you don't see any text because the web font that is required to render that text is not loaded yet. How can we improve this experience? We talked about preloading. We can preload the web fonts, and also with providing font display optional for our custom web font, we leave it up to the browser to decide if this is loaded within, let's say, 100 milliseconds. It will be using the custom font. If not, it will fall back to the system font, which makes sense. Then you don't have to flash the users, or you don't have to display an invisible text. And the next visit, it will be coming from cache and it will be using the web font as you wish. And on Chrome DevTools, you can also see layout shifts in the experience panel. And also the new version of Chrome DevTools shows Core Web Vitals panel. So you can see where layout shifts happens and what's the source of that layout shift and how it impacts the score. And after we did all these improvements and experience gains, how can we make sure that we keep these over time, how to monitor it, how to keep it intact? We can use ready-to-use tools and dashboards to track our app's experience performance over time. Chrome UX Report provides this public data set of the real user experience data on millions of websites. We can use this data, but it will only show the data from 28 days earlier. So if you have done some improvements on these metrics, you will not see them immediately. You will start to see them after 28 days in this report. It also provides this dashboard. It's a new dashboard. It shows you your metrics of these Core Web Vitals and how it's changed over time, how it compares with the expected scores. And also there's an API from Chrome UX. You can build your own dashboard if you like to put this data into your continuous integration environment if you wish. That was all. Thank you very much. I wish everyone a good performance improvement on the web experiences. And if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer.
Thank you very much, Ender. It was a great story. I saw there is already one question in the chat from Gino. I will read it out loud. Is the fact that soon we'll all be using 5G internet in the Netherlands on our mobile phones having any impact on the user experience? Will the websites be heavier just because we can, or will website loads faster? Curious what you think, Ender.
I think, yeah, if we are not forced to improve our scores, developers are usually lazy, including myself. So we would avoid these improvements as we can. It also requires a lot of effort. But overall, it's not about only network. It's also about devices, hardware. So even though you have the latest hardware and latest connection, it doesn't represent a single user experience as we discussed within the myths. So the best would be collecting the field data and making sure the experiences are uniform throughout all the users of the consumers of our websites.
All right.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I was just curious how you think about it.
Yeah, thank
Do you
you.
have time for one more question, Carmen?
Yes, we can do one more question.
Yeah, I had a second question about that report with those Core Web Vitals. Is it something that you have to activate as a web owner, or if you have Google Analytics already active, you can just access the report?
I think you can already access the report from Webmasters panel, not from Google Analytics, but from Webmasters report. But alternatively, the report app that I shared the link of, that app is an external app and that asks for an access for Google Analytics data. So if you use that app and give access to your Google Analytics data, you should be able to see it.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Thank you, Ender. We have less time for the Q&A because it was a little longer, but it was very inspiring, so thanks. If people have questions, they can ask you. I also see your social name there in the screen, I think. All right, let's just close this one up. Thank you very much for your time and your presentation.
Thank you.
And we will go on with the break. Let's do it 5 minutes instead of 10. I think we can go on after 5 minutes. So take your time, take a sip, take a bite, and after that we will go on with Daniel of Picnic. So stay tuned. All right, let's start again. The 5 minutes are over. And we have one presentation left. Last but not least, Daniel Gabler of Picnic, CTO of Picnic, will tell us something about which decisions do you make when building a disruptive tech company. And we have a look at the future of commerce. So Daniel, take the stage.
Cool, thank you. Welcome everybody. Very happy to be with you guys here. I hope you had so far already a few interesting and inspiring talks, and I will try to add a little bit to this afternoon for you guys. Don't be shy if you want to switch on your camera. We can, I think we can all handle that. Feel free to actually just share a bit your face, your smiles when you see something. Feel free to reach out also. Yes, here we have you, Maike. Welcome. And then I will just get started. So let me share the screen. Yes. Okay. Okay. What I want to talk about is something that is a kind of a new insight that we got over the last months. That is something which has not only defined how we go through those kind of COVID months, but also a bit how we design tech and how we see technology evolve over the coming months. So first of all, very happy to be with you here with you guys. My name is Daniel. I'm CTO of Picnic, the online supermarket. For you guys here in Netherlands, hopefully all of you have heard about it. If not, then it's very simple. It's an app where you can buy the food that you like. You press a button and the next day we will be at your door. So service is pretty simple, but there's a lot of tech magic in the background, and I want to talk a bit about how we make all this stuff happen. So first of all, how are we doing it? If you download the app, you have a mobile app, and all of you have experience in building at least web backends or web frontends or the infrastructure around it. So the mobile app that we have built is an iOS and Android native app. Now we are actually in the process of migrating to React Native. Then there's all kind of fulfillment happening in the background. So fulfillment means warehousing operations, the operation where you bring from a trade unit, which means something like a Coca-Cola 48 pack to split it to the consumer orders and then pack it together for the consumers, and then obviously the delivery side to customers. So this is so far so good, an online delivery service. But what is the technique behind? How do you bring it from day one, where you do a lot of pen and paper operation, to a large scale operation where we are now? And I want to give you some background on this kind of story. And that is all around anti-fragility. And then I have 3 kind of takeaway lessons at the end that hopefully will help you to build software in a more reliable, more scalable way as of tomorrow. So first thing, a question: what is uncertainty? Sounds like an obvious question, and most of you had certainly already lectures or classes around probability theory and uncertainty. And we all know that uncertainty essentially means you can't control the outcome. And that is something which is not so unusual. And you know that this is all stuff that happens in daily lives and also in our lives. So we are building software, and sometimes there's more bugs in it, or there's maybe operational interruption. There's all kind of stuff that can happen that make projects not run in the way as we want to see it. But there's one thing, and this is called a black swan event. Many of you have heard about it. So these are kind of rare events, but when they are happening, then those events have a massive impact. And if you think a bit about what has happened over the last months, this is actually such a black swan event, something that is not happening often in the history of human mankind. It has happened only a few times. And the last one, at least comparable, was 1918, 1920. But this has happened again with COVID early last year. So that meant for Picnic the following. There is the COVID happened in late 2019 and early 2020, and then we saw actually a very interesting behavior with customers. And a customer behavior is something which with an online delivery service meant that many customers actually started to shop for online We saw a big demand, but here, what you see now here, this is from Google Zeitgeist, people that search for online Botschaften, which is roughly an indication of how many people are interested in doing online delivery. It was until early March last year on a pretty decent flat level, but then basically it skyrocketed. And if you look to the order of scale, this is a kind of a 10x demand, but nobody can scale up at 10x on the physical side. So you all guys know if you have Google or Azure or Amazon, then you just add a couple of EC2 instances and then you run with a few more servers. But in the physical world, that is becoming a pretty tricky story. So therefore, what did we see as a first thing? Yes, indeed, we saw a lot of people ordered a lot of toilet paper, a lot of rice, a lot of all kinds of different products and noodles, etc. But this is only one part of the story. The other interesting part of the story is, what do customers do in the shop? So if you look to an app like Picnic, then you see that people start shopping in the morning at 6 o'clock, and then around 10 o'clock, you have already quite a few customers in the shop, and this is until around 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock in the evening, and then people go to bed. So this is pretty standard, and we have roughly the same kind of load over the day in the app. But what happened during this kind of early months in March? What we saw there looked like that. Out of the old behavior where everybody was shopping roughly equally distributed between 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the evening, we saw a huge spike at 9. And what happened at 9 is something we could not imagine. We at some point had a scheduler in our system which was saying, well, guys, at 9 o'clock, we are adding additional capacity for customers. And the capacity that we add there, which means basically new delivery slots, was capacity that we added at exactly 9 o'clock. And this is capacity for 14 days ahead ordering. But nobody really realized it because nobody orders 40 days ahead. Normally, you just order for tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. But what happened here is, if you're selling out not only today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, but the next 14 days, the people are starting to shop exactly at 9 o'clock, enter your shop and order for it. So that meant we had to really massively scale up our systems in a way that also the Amazon auto scaling was no longer able to cope with it. So that means all this auto scaling, the cluster auto scaling, the pod auto scaling, everything what you know from Kubernetes, what is actually pretty nice and cool, and all those infrastructure systems did not work in an automated way. So we had to start with scheduled auto scaling, or scheduled scaling. It's not auto scaling. And so therefore, that was kind of the first measure. But the second measure was that none of the systems have been really up for such a rapid scale. And therefore, the start of my story is that we transformed our tech stack from a fragile tech stack. So a tech stack that, if you look here now to the spikes, was actually not coping in the beginning very well with this demand, to an anti-fragile stack. So anti-fragile means this is a system that gains from disorders. Sounds a little bit odd, but I will explain a bit what it means. So let's first start with the terminology. So fragile means you have a system that, if there is an external input to the system, if there's external friction in the system, it breaks. For instance, a glass. So a glass is pretty fine as long as you're not, if it doesn't fall on the ground, and then it will break. But this is only fragility. If you have a robust system, then which is not affected by external input. So that means a shark is a typical robust ecological system where if you have from outside any impact, then usually a shark is not impacted. And what is a typical technical robust system? A technical robust system is a system where you do horizontal scaling. You have horizontal scaling, you have 5, 7, 10 pods. If one of the pods is going down in a system where you have 10 pods, then the 9 remaining pods are still serving traffic. Simple, straightforward. But if you look to anti-fragility, then anti-fragility is a system where if you have external stress, if you have external disorder, then the system itself becomes stronger, not weaker. And our human body is, for instance, a good example for an anti-fragile system. So here you see a bodybuilder is putting stress and disorder to his own system, his own body. And this body doesn't become weaker, but it becomes stronger over time if you do this long enough. So this is an example that can be from human nature be translated to system design, to system architecture. So how do you design and operate and build those kind of anti-fragile systems? So this is an interesting question. And in Picnic, I will give you one example where we've done this. So the delivery experience that we are giving to customers is solving a problem that we call the distribution challenge. And distribution challenge means we want to deliver in a very narrow time window, which is usually just 20 minutes, always on time. So this is around 90% plus on time. One advantage is, in our case, we have very low no-show rates, but this is maybe something I can dive in a bit later in the Q&A. But how do we solve such a distribution challenge? As the first one is, you need to make smart route planning. So that is pretty straightforward. But smart route planning alone is not good enough. You can have enough external factors that, that will influence if you are on time. So what is the customer perception of on-timeliness? If you don't communicate to your customer, let me maybe go one step back. If you don't communicate to your customer, you say, I will be tomorrow at your house between 5 o'clock and 5:20. And then if you don't communicate, and if you're on this window, then you're on time. If you're not in this window, then you're not on time. But you can do this smarter, because you actually can make out of a distribution experience a co-distribution experience. So what does it mean? You communicate your customer, which means now here we are on the way. We will actually be hopefully between 5 and 5:20 at your doorstep. And then you communicate in real time to the customer when we will be there. So this is now an example where you can in real time follow one of our drivers, which is in this case Marco, that we will be at the address, which is Bomberg 4, in 4 minutes. And the reason why this is not only an anti-fragile system is that if we are late, even if we are now maybe 4:57 or maybe 5:23, you will be now seeing in the app in real time when we will be there. And the customer perceives this kind of late delivery no longer as a late delivery, because he has been part of the delivery experience. So therefore, you're changing the expectation from a customer angle. And that is something which makes out of a fragile system or a robust system, if you're delivering in most cases on time, an anti-fragile system. This system, from a consumer side, is an anti-fragile system because you always know exactly when you will deliver, when we will be there. This is exactly also the reason why an Uber driver, why in Uber you see in real time also when the taxi is coming to you. This is not just a kind of a gimmick or gamification. This is because you're becoming part of also the delivery or the shipment experience of the taxi trip to you. So therefore, this is a very interesting way of organizing and building an anti-fragile system. So what does it mean now to build a tech system that is not only scalable and robust, but also anti-fragile? And what does it mean to really live up to excellence in tech and product? So there are 3 things that I want to share with you here. First one is you need to get the product right. And this is something which in Picnic we learned very early on. We knew how to build an app. We knew how to build a logistical system. What we didn't know, because we are not from the food ecosystem, we didn't know exactly what to offer, what to put in our shop. So there are 2 ways how you can do this. On the one hand, you can make a big survey with all kind of let's say with retail experts, and then they will tell you what to offer there. You can ask Nielsen, etc. Or you simply can make it a co-development experience with your customers. So what we do there is the following. On the right-hand side, you see this green button, Vraag het aan. And Vraag het aan means essentially when you're in a category, in this case now beef stick and tartare, and we don't have the product that you're looking for, you simply tell us what you need or what you're looking for. And then if enough customers are asking for it, in our case it's around 5 customers, then we will simply add it to our assortment, which means now that this is no longer a product that we as Picnic have built for customers, but customers themselves build the product for themselves. This is a co-development experience. And this is something which really helped us quite a bit to tailor a product proposition that customers like. But this was just a starting point, because over time, we got a lot of product requests. We have thousands of suggestions. We have now tens of thousands of interactions with customers every single week. So therefore, there's all kind of AI happening in the background, with natural language processing to help to handle the inflow of requests from customers. And therefore, a couple of products we cannot offer simply because physically we cannot distribute it to end customer. Or maybe there are products that are not matching our philosophy of building the assortment. As an example, is we don't have secrets, because that is not really matching the type of company that we want to be. And those kind of, if customers are asking for those kind of product, then we have immediately now a response. And then we see also from the NLP side, what is kind of the sentiment of customers, that we can quickly respond to those customers that are maybe in one of the extreme cases, maybe super excited or maybe super unexcited. So that means also that in this case, you need to think about how do you embrace failure. And you need to, if you iterate quickly with customers, you quickly add a product, you need to also be aware that sometimes you need to also delist the product, or you launch a new product to a new feature to customers. And the easiest way, we all know in tech, this is kind of A/B testing or MVT kind of testing. But you need to run experiments where you embrace also the possibility that something doesn't succeed. So when we are looking into running experiments with our customers or with anybody, any of the stakeholders, we are asking, can this experiment fail? Do we have sufficient likelihood that it can fail? An experiment is only a successful experiment when at least 50%, when there's at least 50% likelihood that it can fail. Otherwise, it is only a project which may be not successful, but it's certainly not an experiment otherwise. So that means also, on the other hand, if you want to run a lot of experiments and if you want to embrace failure, you need to also running a lot of experiments. And running lots of experiments means means that you need to get lean. This is not something that is new for you guys, but always keep in mind, if you want to iterate quickly over product, over your product proposition, over your tech stack, you need to run this in a very, very lean way. But this is only the first one. The second one, and this is something which I find super exciting, is you need to get your tech stack right. Not many people talk about that tech choices, in many cases, make or break a project. And for us, that meant that early on, we decided on a core stack, which basically built the very first version of Picnic, usually the consumer or mainly the consumer proposition. So that means in GitHub and MongoDB and Travis AI and those kind of, let's say, very first systems. But at a later stage, just at a later stage, we moved more into the space of reactive programming, of Python plus Java development, upgrading to Java 11, Snowflake as a kind of a data warehousing system. Beforehand, we had everything just on Redis and Redshift. And now we have also many elements from infrastructure as code that allow us to automatically deploy in new markets, in new domains, in new cities in an automated way. Was everything manual before? Was not needed to automate it with Terraform, but now at scale it is needed. So there's one thing that you need to get from the tech stack right, which means that the depth of automation, you need to think about what is the right level of automation of infrastructure of your development processes of QA at the right time. An example is also for QA, for instance. We started with unit tests from day one, but all kind of integration tests or component tests, we just adopted at a relatively late stage because too much was changing at the early days. So therefore, integration tests don't make too much sense if you're still changing your APIs basically every other day. So that is a very important thing to get right on your tech stack. And then one thing, and this is for us very important, also open source. I know that you guys have been also thinking about, and I think you're already doing it to some extent, but keep in mind open sourcing, blocking, talking with the world about what you're doing is something which you always should keep in mind, because this is a dialogue. This is not only putting out content, but this is also getting feedback from the community. And the third one is, and this is more conceptual now, keep on learning. And all of you guys are reading blogs and you listen to talks and you're joining meetups, etc. But the most important thing with learning is actually not acquiring new knowledge, but is actually unlearning what you knew before and be open for something new. So the example that I'm taking for this is this very nice bike. And if you look careful, then this is a bike that comes from a psychological experiment where if you steer left, the bike goes right. And if you steer right, it goes left. And that is something which symbolizes the way how we learn at different age levels. So if you give this to a 4 or 5 year old, then it's very, very easy for this 4 or 5 year old to ride a bike. Because for a 4 or 5 year old, you simply, there's no big difference of learning to ride this bike versus maybe a regular bike. However, if you're 15 or 20, then you need to quite a bit of already unlearn of cycling. If you're above 40, then it becomes close to impossible to ride such a bike, because you have so much stuff to unlearn, because you have driven a bike you have ridden a bike for a very long time. So therefore, you need to also build a muscle, not only to learn new stuff, which we all in tech do, because that is something what is cool and we want to know the new stuff, but we need to also maintain and hone the skills to unlearn what we knew before. So that means also, for instance, adopting new ways of, for instance, if you do Java programming, new ways of OO or reactive programming. And if you do reactive programming, this is very different to the classical OO pattern. So therefore, we need to unlearn OO patterns and go more in functional programming if you do reactive programming. So this is all stuff which is super important if you for the next steps in your career and then link it. So this kind of the 3 lessons and learned that I wanted to share with you guys. And if you have any question, then I'm very happy to answer whatever you have, you would like to know.
Yes, thank you very much, Daniel, for your talk. I see already a question of Under Ceylon. Can you unmute yourself, Under?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Daniel, for the talk. I have a question about the web channel. Knowing the web being an enormous customer acquisition channel, how Picnic tolerated not having an e-commerce web app before the COVID-19. I know the situation changed a little bit, but is the opportunity cost is calculated? And is there any plan to build a web app in the future?
That's actually a pretty cool question. So we didn't have a web app before COVID-19, and we still don't have a web app. And to be very frank, we also don't plan to have one. When we started Picnic, this was more just a reality. We could only build either one of both, either a web app or a mobile app. We saw that mobile is getting much more traction, and web is something which most likely get less traction. So therefore, we have put let's say, a lot of focus on building the mobile app. What we learned over time, and that's the reason why we will not build a web app, is that it's extremely powerful to have your a mobile-only proposition. What our customers are doing is they are not actually entering the app, making the full order like you would do in a supermarket, which is typically buying 30 items and then checking out. What normally happens is they are normally shopping for 5 to 7 items, then close the app. And this is the same what most people have done also in offline shopping before COVID-19. You have a sticky note on the fridge. You write down if you're running low on milk, you write the next time you need to buy milk. If you're running low on meat, you write down the next time I need to buy some meat. So that is this kind of sticky note that you have on your fridge is now the app, and the customers are using this with the mobile app. But it works only in mobile. It doesn't work if you have it in with a web app, because then you need your laptop or something like that. So therefore, we are very happy with the choice to have started with the mobile app, and we will definitely stick with it.
Thanks.
But actually, the really interesting question is there a better way of doing this than a mobile app? And we are looking now in going into voice, because voice commerce is a super exciting domain. There's a lot of interesting challenges to be solved. Actually, the biggest challenge is not even so much a technical challenge, because the voice to text translation is something which is pretty solid these days, but it's more an interface question. So how do you organize UI UX within voice interface? And think about if you have 50 types of cheeses in your assortment. If somebody asks, please Picnic, put cheese in my basket, which one do you pick? So that is a very interesting open question. If you have ideas, just let me know. I'm all ears if any of you has an idea.
Thank you, Daniel. Is it answered, Under? I think it does.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Great, thank you. are there any more questions? And you can raise your hand. And yeah, I see a question of Maaike. Maaike, can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Well, firstly, thanks, Daniel, for being here. I was wondering, you showed the peak. Nice to see you again. You showed the peak that was happening because of COVID. How do you make sure that you are able to adapt to such a thing? Like, what do you need as an organization to do that?
Yeah. So there are probably 3 key levels that you need to go through. As a very first step, you need to have good monitoring that you identify that you need to do some things there. And the monitoring is important because the classical auto-scaling of systems like, let's say, the AWS infrastructure or Google infrastructure is just not strong enough to cope with this short-term spikes. This is number 1. Number 2, it's very important to set up a good DevOps culture in your organization that teams can also react to those kind of demand spikes. Because at the size of Picnic, so we are now around 200 engineers or close to 200. You cannot have an infra team that is handling the entire infrastructure. All product teams need to handle their own systems. And then a third one is you need to have not only a DevOps org, but you have also DevOps philosophy. So that people, when they're seeing that there is some scaling to be needed or done, that everybody also simply acts and reacts quickly. So this was now a case where we were talking about a situation at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then that is fine because at 9 o'clock most people are at work. But obviously we all know in tech that not all incidents are between 9 and 5. So therefore, now you need also a team that is helping out if something happens, maybe a late evening or in the night, etc.
Thanks. Maybe one additional question. How do you balance between the dev and the ops part? I often see that there's a tendency to do a lot of operations because that's always urgent.
It's a good question. So as a very first step is it's important to really understand how much ops do you do. So for us, the most important thing is that we start to more systematically track, or at least define some proxies. How much ops work do we do? Because it's tricky to really work on, let's say, a dev versus ops split if you don't know exactly how much dev and ops you do. Then on the ops side, we are looking very careful into the areas. We have basically 3 buckets for all ops work. So these are, on the one hand, ad hoc operational issues that need to be handled because they don't appear too often and there's no real other way. But usually with the operate, then you have also structural operational problems. So stuff that appears in regular intervals and that you can solve by improving systems to set up auto-scaling, to set up whatever kind of stuff, or just go to bigger instances to have less likelihoods that that the issue happens. So this is a bucket that you obviously can tackle, and we do a systematic root cause analysis of every incident where we identify which kind of structural issue has led to this problem, and therefore we can solve it, and hopefully it doesn't happen at the next time. And the third bucket are issues which are more systemic, not so much on the operational side, but more systemic on the technical side, which we need to solve more on let's say on a long-term technical, on the software development side. And that means usually then also changing larger software architectures or the way how you, let's say, database schemas, etc.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your question, Maaike, and Daniel for your answer, of course. I think we have to close off this meeting, but if people still have questions left, they can find you somewhere, I think.
Sure. But, if you guys want to have, I don't know how, if you make it, have to make it now closing, or we can also have 5 more minutes if you like.
Yeah, we can.
I don't know if people have time. I'm here, so no worries.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I don't see any questions now in the chat. I see one. Yeah, from Jurian. You can unmute yourself.
Hey, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do you use React Native in your app for Picnic?
It's a pretty nice question. So We have started with native apps in 2014. So we built the first version of the Picnic apps in 2014. This was a time where Swift 1.0 came out in August or September 2014. We started to build the app in summer. Nothing was really properly building, so we actually were torn between building in Objective-C at this time or in Swift, but we knew that Apple is pretty strict in phasing out old languages, so therefore we jumped on Swift. At around 2016, and we looked also in cross-platform frameworks. At this point in time, React Native was there. So React Native is from the version 1.0 is from 2013. We didn't feel comfortable at this time with React Native, but in 2017, we have built the first React Native app, which is our driver app. So the rider app, which our runners, so the delivery guys are using, is built completely in React Native. And that was a very good choice. So we are super happy with it. And we are now step by step migrating also our existing Picnic app in React Native. And we have done actually a couple of weeks back a big comparison between React Native and Flutter, because Flutter is obviously much newer. The version 1.0 came out in 2018, and but it got a lot of traction. So if you look to the community size and the number of people that are adopting it, it's roughly it's comparable size as React Native by now. So we wanted to get an updated view. But if you want to have really native experience in your app, then you're probably better with React Native. Jeroen, have you tried it? How about you, Jurian?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm using it in some personal project of mine, and I really like it. But yeah, I wanted for such a big project like Picnic, there's no final version from it. There's no 1.0 version from Picnic app yet. So yeah, you felt confident enough to develop the Picnic app with it. It's pretty cool.
Well, maybe to add to this, I think there's, I'm not sure what is a final version 1.0. There is what we say is the MVP. The very first version that we give in customers' hand is the version 1, and then afterwards you have a version 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Actually, version numbers don't say too much. And product is never done. I think this is just a reality in tech, and therefore you will always iterate further over it. One real advantage of React Native is if you look a bit more into how to build a community, as it uses actually JavaScript as a software, a dialect to express the business logic, and that is a big helper to find people that adopt it. So therefore, it's easier than Flutter, which has this, what is it called, Django or so, which is where it's much harder to find a larger community. Has any of you guys an opinion about React Native versus Flutter? Or Dart? Yes, sorry. Yes, I see here. Sorry, guys.
All right. You saw the chat. Okay. Are there any questions left, guys? You can now raise your hand. I don't see anything coming right now. No.
Has any of you guys done something with an observability stack? So things like Prometheus, etc. Is anybody of you interested in this stuff? Let's start with that. None of both. Okay. No. you should at least read up on it. So this is pretty interesting. So if you want to go full scale into CI/CD, then QA becomes a very, very different game. So because you don't do any longer ticket-based testing, you're releasing every day a few dozen or a few hundred times. So an example is, for instance, our payment module. So the way how you pay in the Picnic app, you're releasing every day between 10 and 20 times. And then you don't have any longer manual testing. So that you build up not only unit testing, but you build also a component testing. For instance, we are using a framework, Cucumber there. So this is behavioral-driven design and behavioral testing. And that is something which becomes very important in a new paradigm if you're actually in a CI/CD world, and make continuous deployments also to production. And then obviously you need, because you're permanently releasing, you need to have a very different way of identifying if a version is not working as it should. So therefore you need to have a good observability. So you need to make much more than just monitoring. So all of us probably have seen monitoring tools like New Relic and others, but you need to go beyond monitoring and need to really set up an observability strategy to release that often. So if you go, for instance, to a site like Booking, Booking is releasing every day between 500 and 800 times. But interesting one is that Booking itself has very little QA. And what they say is, well, pre-COVID it was even heavier, but what they say is we have enough customers. So while testing, we are just launching it to 1% of our customers, a new feature, and we have a good identification if a feature performs or a feature is bug-free, and we just use our customers to test it.
Well, thank you, Daniel. It's always hard with teams that you don't hear anyone, but I know everyone was very. This was a very interesting talk. So thank you very much for your time. Then I think we are closing off because I don't see any questions coming in anymore. Yeah, a big thanks for you for coming today. I am going to close off this session. Thank you everyone for coming, for joining the session. I feel a bit like Oprah Winfrey today because I can give you all a little present at the end of the session. During next week, we will send everyone a free performance test of their website in their mailbox. So keep an eye on your mailbox. And also we will send, of course, the recording and the presentations of today. And besides that, we hope we will see you again at another event. Just check out our page, our linkit.nl/events page. And we also have lots of other events next year. So we will hope to see you soon. Thank you all. Thank you, Under, Simon, and Daniel for giving your talks today. And enjoy the rest of your evening.
Cheers all.
Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.